Hey T-Fam, and welcome to our very first YouTube Live and Facebook Live broadcast.
What's up, YouTube?
Today, we are going to be talking about all of your forehand questions. So make sure that you drop them in the live chat so that we can get everything answered. Now, we have a couple of people at the table that I don't think you guys know. So let's go through some quick introductions.
I'm Ian.
You know, Ian Westerman. I'm your coach, Kirby Bridges. We have a couple of new coaches on our staff. Kevin and Megan Garlington just moved up here from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, Kevin is from Total Tennis Domination, so you might recognize him. You might actually have already been following him over on his channel. So we're so lucky to have both of them. They have coached at every level from national championship winning adults to world ranked juniors. I mean, we're really lucky to have them on our team. Hey guys, hi Facebook. So we have a bunch of questions already teed up, but again, make sure that you let us know who you are, where you're from, and what forehand questions you have in the live chat, either on YouTube or on Facebook.
We got Atlanta, Vietnam, Korea, Taiwan.
Awesome.
Houston,
Love
Japan,
it.
Texas, Oregon.
Texas.
This is beautiful. So we typically do a webinar like this bi-weekly within Essential Tennis Academy. So this is the very first time that we open it up to the public, but we just wanted to be able to connect with you guys. And
Ashland, Wisconsin in the house.
Yes. Yeah, so we're broadcasting from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Brazil, Bolivia, California.
New York.
All over the place.
Wow, you guys. All right.
Wales.
Let's get to some questions.
Okay, so the first question comes from Tim Norris. Would love to hear your comments and advice/tips on not overhitting those slower balls that aren't short enough to volley, but not quite on pace. I hope that makes sense.
Man.
That's what he said.
This is just awesome. Serbia, Boston, India, Switzerland, Germany. Are people just writing random stuff? All right, so sitters we're talking about?
Yes, we're talking about sitters. So right off the bat, we're talking about sitters.
For me, I think there's two most important parts. Part number one is creating your own acceleration. And I think this is the part that really trips up amateur, just average level tennis players the most. Kind of ironically, players are more comfortable when there's pace on the ball than if it's just sitting there, because they don't have the physical confidence to accelerate and generate their own pace. And so this is something I highly recommend that you practice on your own with a basket of balls, just dropping a ball in front of you and practicing making a confident swing with zero momentum on the ball and just generating your own. Length of swing is key. Being loose and relaxed is also super key. And for me, the other most important part of this is shape. When you're close up to the service line, there's very little momentum on the ball. You're generating all of your own. If you're not creating any topspin to arc or curve your shot, then you've got a tiny, tiny narrow window of success over the top of the net. And so a little bit low, you hit the net, a little bit high, it ends up sailing too far. And so most players miss their first try, and their fix is to try to be more careful on the next one. And then shot after shot after shot, they get more and more tentative, and they're just pushing the ball over, and they totally lose their confidence. Sorry if I covered everything, but those are, I'm sure you guys have other thoughts. What other short sitter tips do you guys have?
I would think one really important thing for me is making sure you move up to the ball, because sometimes you get a sitter and you don't realize it. So the sitter's already on its way down and you've kind of missed that little opportunity to really be aggressive. So I think the first thing is being aware and seeing the sitter and seeing it as it's coming over, that you're anticipating and moving up to the ball so you can get there and hit the ball in the correct strike zone. The next thing I think is how you address the ball with your feet, because I think a lot of times with a sitter, we'll get up there, we think it's slow, and we stop too early, and we lose the momentum. Where if you can get up there and use your footwork to kind of get your weight through the ball, and then use that to do what Ian's talking about with the shape, I think it just makes it a lot easier. So kind of wrapping up, just moving up to the ball and making sure that you're using your feet in the right way to be aggressive. Where I think a lot of people just kind of get close enough and then they think the swing is going to do everything.
We have so many amazing questions that we're just going to keep it like rapid fire. So we won't need to, a lot of times we kind of go down the line, you know, and get the perspective of each coach, but I want to answer as many questions as possible.
Yeah, let's keep it moving.
So I want to follow up with the last question on the short sitter, and what's your mentality as you approach that sitter? What's your mental attitude towards a sitter?
I think the biggest thing is that so many people talk about, you know, they get anxious because they should never miss that ball because it's so easy. And the goal is to be really patient and to make sure that you are going up with the intent of hitting a good shot and not necessarily trying to always hit a winner. I think if you do much better if you're trying to hit a great shot to set up the point rather than going for a huge ball.
I love it.
Yeah, I think offense should be first priority, but it totally depends on how. Kevin talked before about identifying early, about anticipating, about moving up to the ball quickly. You should be hustling to reach the ball while it's still as high as possible so that you have the ability to attack. Once the ball drops below the level of the net, then your options start decreasing dramatically, and you have to start thinking about just placing the ball instead of really going after it, depending on your level of skill. So, yeah, Kevin's talked earlier about identification and movement, super critical there. But yeah, agree with Megan. Your first instinct should be attack. As the ball drops lower and lower and lower, and it takes you longer and longer to get to it, you have to start kind of transitioning your mindset a little bit into approaching and playing like the best possible pattern so that you're in a good position to play the net effectively. Assuming you're going to the net, which most of the time is going to be the case.
Megan, do you have any questions over there that are burning up your chat?
No, so far everybody's really anxious to hear everything that you have, I think, right now.
Okay, all right. Well, I have about 20, so I'm going to. All right, next question.
YouTube representing.
I love you guys. Look at that, 100K. You guys are the best. Okay, how to get rid of those hand-wrist twists on the forehand, and where does it come from? You know what I'm talking about? When we so often we hear coaches say, just to create topspin, turn over the ball. I'm going to get out of the way so that Ian can demonstrate.
All right. If you hit the ball cleanly, where obviously we want to hit the ball, and your hand and your wrist will stay stable. Any kind of twisting of the grip, any kind of twisting of your hand, unless it's in golf, they call this the yips. Where you're really kind of anxious and tight and tense, and there's like quick like twitching right at contact. Keeping that out of the equation, the only reason why your hand or your grip is going to switch or twist is from not hitting the middle of the racket. Anywhere below the equator on your racket face is going to cause the racket face to twist and turn downwards. Anywhere above the equator is going to cause the racket face to open and twist the opposite direction. So the only fix for this, the only real true fix, is to get better at hitting the ball cleanly. The Band-Aid fix that most tennis players try to employ is to grip tighter on the racket, which puts more tension throughout your entire body, not just in your grip. And it might kind of fix the problem. The problem isn't that the grip is shifting. The problem is that you're hitting off center. And so if your only concern is fixing the grip shift, then gripping tighter will help, but it's also going to destroy your fluidity, your efficiency, how smoothly you're able to move your body. So the only true fix for this is to hit the ball more cleanly. And that's kind of a boring like answer, but at the end of the day, that's the only way that that's really going to be cleared up. Gripping tighter is a Band-Aid solution and really not a solution at all. Even if you keep the grip from twisting and turning, you're still hitting off center. You're still not getting the spin, the power, or the control or the placement that you should if you were hitting the ball cleanly, where you should be making contact. Anything else?
Get a new grip, maybe. You might need a new grip. Just if you got a slippery grip, a little off-center hit. Obviously, watch the ball, but I get a new grip.
Blame your grip. There you go. It's the equipment's fault.
If you want an excuse, then that will be it. Okay, I don't know how to say your handle name, but I love you anyway. It's ZZ Factor ZZ. Should the looseness of the wrist be the same during impact with the ball as it is during the swing? I think what he's asking is, do you what you're just talking about, do you tense up upon contact?
That's tricky. I'd love to see some kind of scientific data on this. My instinct on it is that there's a little bit of squeezing, like right before contact, but I hesitate to even say that because 99% of you watching, on average, are way too tense and tight as it is. And so for me, asking an amateur player to be like, yeah, be real loose, and then squeeze like right before contact is like exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to help people in their improvement. So the reality might be there's a little bit of a squeeze like right at contact, but just pretend I didn't say that, basically.
Well,
what do you guys think?
No, I totally agree. There's a little bit of squeeze at contact. I think the kind of thing to watch out for is that you're squeezing so much that you feel the rest of your entire arm and shoulder kind of become super rigid.
Yeah.
I think it's just a little bit of squeezing here is okay, but as long as you can keep that fluidity in your arm to keep the movement going, you're not like squeezing so tight that you're taking away from the acceleration, that's when it becomes a problem.
I also feel like it happens naturally. Your grip will naturally take control and squeeze a little tighter as you go through the ball. So you don't really always have to think about how hard you're squeezing unless you're squeezing too hard. But as long as you're loose, very seldom does your body let your racket fly out of your hand. So especially at contact.
Well, it's this whole, we use it in the videos, this comparison, and I'm sure you've heard it before when it comes to tension, it's like when you're in a car crash and you know that it's about to come, you know that your car is about to collide with something, your body tenses up. It's the same thing in this collision with the ball. And through our videos, you can see that we do everything that we can to train this so that you aren't tensing up as this happens. Because so much of the time, our potential that we have on every ball is absolutely killed by the amount of tension. So no matter what, it shouldn't be a factor that you're really thinking about, that you shouldn't be tightening up on contact. So everybody out there should be actively working to be looser as you play.
100%.
Hey, Kirby.
Yes.
Real quick, back to the high sitters for a second. Aaron had a quick question.
Great.
About the forehand versus backhand side. What would be the difference that you guys would recommend?
No difference for me. I mean, in general, I guess people tend to be more confident with their forehand side. Like for me personally, my forehand side is much more of a weapon than my backhand side. So I'm just more on the offensive. I'm higher on the offensive scale on my forehand side automatically than on my backhand side. I can still hit heavy topspin with a ball 4 or 5 inches off the ground on my forehand side. Backhand side, once it drops below, sadly, 3 feet, I'm kind of SOL on the topspin. So I go to slice a lot easier. So I think that's really the only difference. It's like you need to be very aware of your own strengths and weaknesses. Know what how high you're still able to attack, so that when you do get to the ball, whether it's a forehand or a backhand, you have already a good sense of what you're doing with the ball, where you're aiming, how much topspin, or are we going to a slice, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the only real difference.
Yeah, I think kind of tagging on that, the difference, especially for your backhand, depending on if you're a one or two-handed backhand. I have a one-handed backhand. So I think there's a little bit more limitation in the height and where you can get the ball, where your forehand being one-handed, you can maybe handle the ball a little bit higher and hit down on the ball a little bit more, where it's a little bit tougher if you have a one-handed backhand, or if it gets too high, I might slice. Or if you're two-handed, same thing, you have a little bit of that limit of reach. So it's really, I think, dependent that I tend to favor, same thing, the forehand. And if I do have a backhand where I have to really manage myself and make sure I get into the most optimal contact zone to hit the ball, because if it gets too high or it's too low, I have a smaller window on the backhand side than the forehand side.
YouTube's killing it.
Questions. Wow, you guys, this is awesome. Okay, Let's jump. Do you have a question on Facebook that
I think
we answer his question?
We answered that one. The next question would be about racket and string tension. So I don't know if you want to do that now or wait.
We can get to that in a different live coaching session. Today, we are all about the forehand. So make sure that your questions are forehand related. We'd love to answer every single question, but today we have to keep the topic really specific. So
I have one more, Kirby.
Okay, thank you.
Tricks to create better space and contact point on the forehand side.
Great.
Which I think is a great question.
Yeah, for sure.
That's from Tony.
We just had a student, and actually he was already a strong 4-0 player, already winning at 4-5, that we just had a couple weeks ago travel here to Wisconsin. And that was kind of the primary thing that we identified with his forehand was on average, everything was just a little bit too close. And the way we identified that was looking at space between his elbow and his body, which frequently was non-existent as he was making contact. So with him, he was very kinesthetically aware. Like, he was a good athlete, already a pretty good player. So with him, it was just a matter of slowing everything down a lot and then having him shadow swing through and feel what it was like to create more space between his body and his elbow as he went out towards contact. And so we spent like 20, 30 minutes just slowly moving him through shadow swings, feeling what it was like to go out to that spot in relationship to his body, which was probably a solid 4 or 5 inches further away than what he was used to. So pretty, big difference. And then practicing the entire motion, but really focusing on contact. And it's just a matter of slowly increasing difficulty level. After he got really comfortable and consistent executing that space, then we would drop him a ball just right in front of him so he could practice extending out. Didn't matter where the ball went or what his target was or anything. And then if you guys have watched our content on YouTube, you see how we progress slowly from dropping to a little bit of underhand toss to a little bit of feeding, maybe back in no man's land. There's no man's land. And then finally back to the baseline, all while really monitoring him closely and making sure he was maintaining that distance away from his body. So, that's how we did it with our student. Eventually, you all will see the footage of that. It's definitely going to be a video on our channel. Something else I've done in the past is put an obstruction in front of a student. And where's anything else? Something that they could step on and still be safe. And then tell them that they cannot cross that line, and then hand feed or feed from the other side of the net, and have them purposefully stay there and feed a little too far away from them so that they get overstretched. For me, a lot of times it's important for players to feel what the other end of the spectrum is like. So if their pattern is being really close, I'll have them show me 10 or 15 reps where they're overextended and actually a little off balance. And then I say, okay, now meet it someplace in the middle so that they can try to find a happy medium between those two extremes. Those are 2 ideas.
I just put a link to one of our previous YouTube videos that will help you with spacing and judgment to the ball. And that's a really important one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people
huge, yeah.
don't quite know, they don't realize how far off their judgment is. So that's a great drill. It's an easy one. You can do it on your own if you want. Let's jump to the next question. Next question is from Alex Gonzalez. I went from a 3.5 to a 4.0 by watching your videos. So nice job, Alex.
Sweet.
And my question is, for a safety shot with arc and shape, do I close the strings or open the strings?
You close the strings or open the strings. I think the strings are basically neutral, and the height is going to be determined a lot by the swing path. Now, yeah, if you open the strings a little bit, it's going to add some height, but we don't want to add so much height and lose the spin. So I think it's really important to make sure you're monitoring, not only making sure that the strings are pretty vertical, but the swing path. If the swing path is very vertical, you're going to get the ball going higher versus kind of a linear straight through swing path, which isn't going to have that shape you want. So generally for a rally ball, I'm thinking a nice vertical swing path with spin.
Yeah, the heavier of a ball you're trying to hit, the more closed the racket face should be. But we're talking like tiny, tiny adjustments. my rule of thumb when I'm communicating about ground strokes is always flat racket face. You'll hear people debate this endlessly on the internet, talking about how it's closed, like as much as 10 degrees or 12 degrees. And that might be true for Federer or Gonzalez or whoever else has a massive forehand. But for most of us, using average racket head speed, the fact of the matter is you shouldn't be looking to close the racket face any more than vertical. Unless you're starting to really, really accelerate fast, aggressively on a very steep path, like Kevin was talking about. The steeper the swing path is, and the faster the acceleration is, the more closed the racket face should be. But we're talking like 1 or 2 degree differences, not 45 degrees, closed, angled down towards the court. Open is the last thing you want to do. A combination of upward swing and open racket face equals chasing the ball over the fence.
I have a question from Hamim, who really wants us to answer this question. Is it better to forcefully brush upwards right after contact, or to let the arm go forward and then up naturally, still getting topspin?
Oh man, such a loaded question. After contact doesn't matter. The ball's already gone. So any kind of effort or acceleration should be happening before and up to contact. After contact is all about deceleration, not acceleration. That's probably not very good emphasis.
Yeah.
Acceleration. So where was I? Yeah, anything you do after the ball is gone is pointless. Now, it's not to say the follow-through is meaningless. Really, what a good follow-through is a representation of what the racket was doing before contact. And natural means allowing the racket to go on the path that you sent it on before contact was made. Might be getting a little too philosophical here. But long story short, contact only takes 2 to 4 thousandths of a second. Accelerating after that point is not doing your shot any good at all.
So many questions. Quick question.
I want to get to Lal Spartan's question.
You got a good question?
Just because I like the screen name Lal Spartan. I don't know. We need to find, where is this question?
You find it. I'm going to ask
Post it again,
this one.
Spartan.
Okay. What grip is good for the forehand?
Grip is good for the forehand. I think there's a bunch of different grips you can use for the forehand. I think the most common grip is probably the semi-Western grip, because it gives you the most variety between having the racket, having the hand slightly under the racket where you can create spin, but still have where you can hit through the ball. I don't personally recommend a lot of extreme grips, like a lot of super Western grips, or sometimes people try to use a continental grip for a forehand. I think they can sometimes limit you in different situations. I think for me, the best grip that I tend to teach a lot and see a lot of pros use is the semi-Western grip.
I think you also want to use what's comfortable for you. There's also, if a little bit off of semi-Western towards the top, towards Eastern is more comfortable for you, then you can use that. A lot of, my grip is not completely semi-Western all the way over, and I can still generate plenty of topspin. So I think you have to kind of use what's comfortable for you as well.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be a good fit with your playing style as well. Player who doesn't hit super heavy topspin like Federer or Del Potro uses a much more conservative grip. Del Potro is up close to continental. And then somebody who obviously known for super heavy spin like Nadal and all the other big clay court players, pretty much exclusively semi-Western, or maybe a little bit of a strong semi-Western. Not a whole lot of full Western, like true full Western grips on the tour. Also, not really anybody above Eastern besides Del Potro, and I think Gasquet is actually pretty far up towards the top as well. So you really can't go wrong with Eastern or semi-Western. I think the question you need to answer is, am I more of a flat ball, like more of a drive hitter, or am I more of a heavy topspin, loopy, archy kind of player?
I like that, archy.
Archy. That's the
Are you an archy player?
That's a technical term for it.
Breaking news, I have a question from Nolan Reed. The question is, what kind of forehand will make my cats love me more?
Okay.
And Arky.
I don't have a cat, so.
All right, let's
definitely Arky.
Let's move on to Lol Spartan's question.
Yes.
That's Andre from Texas. Thanks for resubmitting your question. The question is, how can I get more control in my shots? Because every time I try to hit a crossed ball, I send it to the middle of the court.
Meaning cross court?
I think so. I think every time I go cross court.
All right. So Andre, aka Lol Spartan, the way that you hit a ball cross court is by making contact in front enough that that your strings start to angle. If I wanted to hit a shot that went directly down the length of the table here, then I would need to make contact so that my strings are directly in line with the table. The primary thing that causes the ball to go where it goes is the angle of the racket face. So all other things remaining equal, if the ball was coming towards my racket and I started a little bit sooner, then I'll make contact a little bit further around my body, and that angles my strings in a cross-court direction. So the sooner you begin your swing, the more angled your strings will be. The more angled your strings will be, the more cross-court the ball will go. So if every time you try to hit cross-court, the ball is going down the middle, it means you're a little bit late with the timing of your swing. You're waiting a little too long to begin your swing, and so everything is leaking, if you're a right-handed player, to the right. So it's not about swinging faster, it's more about swinging sooner relative to where the ball is as it's traveling towards your racket. The longer you wait, the more to the right the ball will go on your forehand. The sooner you start, the more to the left the ball will go. It's really that simple. Now, most players have a very kind of ingrained rhythm or a timing that's most comfortable to them. I'm this way with my backhand. I tend to be late, and it's really hard for me. It's just the pattern that I've ingrained over the years. It's difficult for me to get out in front really early, and so it's hard for me to hit cross court. This is something that you just have to train. And for me, kind of like what I was describing before, going to the opposite end of the spectrum and like aiming for the side curtain and hitting that 20 times really helps kind of break out of that rut and get a feel for going cross court instead of hitting everything straight or inside out or down the line. Make sense? Good question, Lol Spartan.
Kirby, I have a couple pressing questions here. Can I go over a couple?
Yes, please, please.
Okay. We have Clayton is wondering, recovering from calf surgery, can we talk about the leg involvement in the forehands?
That's tough.
That's tough.
I know that's kind of a loaded question.
Recovering from calf.
No pun intended.
I think that's a tough deal in the sense that all the power, or a lot of the power you're going to hit is going to come from the legs and kind of transfer up. So, I mean, if you just had a calf injury, it's kind of tough to kind of get to the point where you're loading again. Now, does that mean you can't go out and play and not use your leg as much? No, you can still go out and play and swing and have a great time. But definitely if you're talking about generating like a lot of topspin or something, or really using the kind of the ground force and shift it or loading your legs, that's going to be a lot tougher with coming back from a calf injury.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. Yeah, using the body efficiently and in the right order. Energy ideally should come up from the ground and then through the core, out through the arm, into the racket head. But and so if you have some kind of limiting factor like that, I'm guessing you've got some kind of doctor's orders as far as what you can or can't do. And really, this is such a tough question. I mean, it really depends on what your habits were ahead of time. If you didn't use your body very holistically or effectively in the first place, then it might not be a big deal. If you're a mostly arm-dominated hitter, then it's not probably something you have to think about. If you were using your whole body really effectively already, then you might have to, it's going to take some conscious effort to not use your lower body and just focus on your upper body swing for the time being until you can actually get back to full speed.
You guys are killing it with the questions. Megan, you said you have another question over
on Facebook?
Yeah,
that'd be great. Yeah. We have, would you agree that semi-Western and Western grips develop more in competition as players face higher bouncing balls? And is it best to start teaching with an Eastern?
Mm.
Go ahead.
The thing that I don't like is the second part of that question, which is starting off doing something that you plan on changing down the line. I think that when you get so ingrained in a habit, then it becomes this bigger project down the line. And so people just learn to adapt to it. So my philosophy on it is that if, same thing, we see it with the continental grip all the time. If you're going to learn it, then learn it right the first time. And not that Eastern grip is wrong by any means, but if you have an intention to change it down the line, then my opinion is to learn it that way from the get-go.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest thing, you can make little changes as you go, and you're going to need to tweak things as you go, but I think it's really important that you kind of stick with the foundation early when you learn it from the beginning. I have another question. Alan says that most of the time his forehand is heavy spin, but he's looking for more power. What were some pointers that we could give him to try to generate more power on his forehand side?
I think one thing that is super important to understand that I think we're so enamored with hitting heavy spin, but understanding what does spin do to the ball. It adds control, but it also slows the acceleration of the ball. So you have to find this good mix of driving the ball with spin and knowing the situation you're in. If you're rallying from the baseline and you want that heavy spin to maybe have the ball jump up and down when it hits the court, then that's fine. But if you get a short ball that's slightly inside the court, you don't necessarily want to hit this heavy spin ball because it might slow the ball down. You might want to still drive through it with some spin. I'm not saying hit a completely flat ball, so the ball travels through the court more. So I think it's finding that right combination of spin and drive and shape to get the result you want. It's just not a kind of one size fits all, and I'm just going to hit spin, more power, because at some point it doesn't mix. The spin's going to just slow the ball down, and you're working against what you're really trying to do, which is create power.
Yeah, and the way you differentiate, I agree with Kevin 100%. It's all about finding the right mix of drive versus spin. I kind of view it as a ratio, AKA like 70% drive, 30% spin, or 70% spin, 30% drive. Totally different shapes and totally different types of shot. And the way that you change that is by changing your swing path as you go through contact. If you're already making a ton of topspin, it means you've got plenty of racket head speed. Swinging faster won't level the ball out at all. It'll just make you hit an even heavier ball, and even more curve, and even more arciness.
There we go. We're back.
So
arky.
It's all about swing path. The ball's flight will always mirror the swing path that you used as you made contact. So if contact is made at waist height, and I want to hit a totally level straight drive, then my racket should never drop below that point, waist height. And so I should have a lateral swing path. That'll create a directly hit shot, aka a flat drive. The lower below that point my racket drops before making contact, the steeper my swing path is, and so the more shape the shot is going to have. 1,000%. So if all you can make right now is spin, then you have a really low drop before making contact, and you have not yet learned how to go forwards through the point of contact. In other words, you're dropping the racket too low if you're trying to drive but you can't drive. So this is all kind of all about feel, and it takes time to develop different mixes. There's like a million shades of gray of combinations of drive and spin that you should be able to create depending on the situation you're in. What are you talking about, Kirby?
50 Shades of Gray.
No, a million shades of gray.
All right, next question from Alok Aurora. How can I shorten my swing and still get the same or more power? My question is why you want to shorten your swing.
Maybe it's too long.
Do you think so?
Depends on what shot you're going for too. I mean, I think if you're looking at like a return of serve, your backswing is going to be a lot shorter.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But if you're looking at a short ball that's mid-court, right at your shoulder, swing might be a little bit bigger.
Yeah. I think also one thing to think about is definitely the level you're playing at, because as you increase in level, the ball is going to travel faster and you're going to get less time to swing. So doesn't mean you can't still be successful. I mean, you look at guys like Gonzalez, who had a massive forehand, a ginormous swing, but you also have to look at the position on the court which he had to play. He had to play further back than most players because his swing was so big, versus, let's say, like a Federer who has a pretty, I would say, compact swing. And he has more variety in the ability to play a little bit closer to the baseline. For me, time is power, meaning that if you can take time away, the better off you're going to be, because time, I mean, you can't overcome someone who's taking too much time away from you. So if you can be closer to baseline with a slightly maybe shorter compact swing, not super short swing, and still hit an effective ball, I think that's where it is, matching the swing with effectiveness and your position on the court.
Fantastic. David Johnson says, I want to know you guys' preference. Do you teach the unit turn as soon as you recognize the forehand coming, or do you pace the turn with the ball over the speed, which discourages a stopping in momentum?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think it's totally situational. It depends on where developmentally the player is, and situationally, like what are they doing on the baseline. When you watch professional players go hit a shot that's far away from the middle of the baseline and they have a long distance to travel to get there, they don't set up like this and run towards the ball. They run first and then set up as they get closer. On the other hand, if the ball is being struck just a step or two away from where they are, then frequently they will start by taking the racket back. So time is huge, which Kevin was just talking about. Distance that needs to be traveled is huge. It's faster to just turn and run without taking the racket back first. So if it's a defensive, emergency kind of situation, and you're going to be struggling just to get to the ball at all, then unit turn doesn't make any athletic sense, meaning immediate unit turn. I don't mean unit turn at all, but immediate unit turn and then running with the hands up. So I think it's important to learn both. It's important to learn how to get to the ball athletically when it's a long distance away, and then set up as you get there, as you're talking. Who was it? Who's this person?
This is David.
David was talking about not breaking up momentum and kind of doing it smoothly as you get there. I think that's important. It's also important, Megan was talking about the return to serve, to also learn how to immediately prepare and then execute your swing. Tennis is so much less black and white than I think most teachers make it sound. There's so many different situations that the response needs to be trained for each. And so for me, I think the answer is both. 4-minute explanation to say both.
So Baby Djokovic asked a question about the take back. Would you guys recommend a high take back or a low take back? I take my racket back high and get more power like Delpo. You'd think that he would say, I get more power like Djokovic because he's Baby Djokovic. Djokovic doesn't want to aspire to be Delpo, but that's to each his own. But I tend to lose spin or
maybe
on points
Delpo
that hit
goes to
long.
sleep at night wishing he was Novak.
Maybe. What a sad existence. Okay, so anyway, do you guys recommend a high take back or a low take back?
I think it's
sounds like Goldilocks question.
Yeah, it's for me kind of relative of what's high. I mean, are you talking taking the racket back way back here? I don't normally teach that. I just want the racket generally to be slightly above the head. Kind of just in my research, looking at like a lot of the pros, generally when they take the racket back, the racket's slightly above their head. And I think that's to generate some momentum. So when the racket comes down, you get a lot of natural momentum through the ball. I think in this case, it sounds almost extreme. It's like you're taking the racket back so far, but then it goes back to a question we talked about. Well, is that making your swing big? And is that going to cause where if the ball comes deep, you don't have enough time to complete your swing, which now kind of takes away the effectiveness of your forehand. So I think it's really important to find, again, that right ratio of being effective and having the swing that's going to make you the most effective for the type of ball you want to hit.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of ground strokes in general that start with the racket down and back. There's a few examples of that on the pro tour, but not a lot. I'm also not a big fan of, as Kevin was describing, overdoing the high take back part of it. There is benefit, as Kevin was describing, to allowing the racket to fall and gather speed, gather momentum. There is benefit to that, but there comes a time where, depending on your level of skill and athleticism and talent, where the return on investment on that is actually negative because it becomes more and more difficult to time the swing the higher and higher you start. So I think it's a matter of finding kind of a happy medium. When you watch the top players in the world, you rarely see the hands come up much more than where they started in the ready position. It's more the racket head that's raising than it is their hand coming up and like looping the racket. Occasionally, like Del Potro, you will see the hands like raise, but for a waist tight ball, really not much reason to take the hand up above waist tight.
And I think just to add with Del Potro, you kind of look at the grip a little bit.
Sorry for that.
Everybody move your arm really fast.
Gesticulation.
We're watching
Sorry,
the tape back. We're not really that crazy.
I am.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Okay, sorry.
What were you saying, Kevin?
No, I think also, I mean, you look at Del Potro and you look at like the position he plays on the court, but I think also the grip gives him the advantage that with an Eastern grip, it doesn't necessarily mean the rack has to get all the way down. It's a little bit easier because since the racket's not as close. So there's little things to consider, but I mean, again, find what's going to be effective for you, the type of game style that you play, and the type of ball you want to hit. I mean, if you're, how tall is Del Potro?
6'7".
Yeah, if you're 6'7" and you move like Del Potro, you can consider it.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. Check.
All right, let's jump into a question from Michael. The question is, my coach mentioned to say bounce hit before hitting the forehand to improve my rhythm. Why is this so useful? And do people do this still after learning how to play tennis? Honestly, I think that our inclination is to say no. It's a really beginner kind of thing. But depending, when you play on so many different surfaces, or you're playing tournaments week in and week out in different circumstances, scenarios, different court surfaces. I remember going, not playing very well, or maybe going from indoors to outdoors, having to really feel myself adjusting. And for a few minutes, I would think bounce hit, just to find a rhythm. So I don't think, no shame in your game if you're not a brand new beginner and you're still using this.
I was doing it yesterday. No, but I mean, I with students today, I constantly, if they're having trouble rhythm, say ball bounce hit. And it's the same thing. It's a great little exercise, not only for your rhythm, but I think just to get you watching the ball. I think we take for granted focusing on the ball. And sometimes you're having one of those bad days, and it's just because you're not watching the ball to find the rhythm. So I think by calling out each one of those stages of where the ball is, it really helps you. You have to watch the ball to call it. So I think it's a great exercise.
And it's really good also if you're working on the rise. Like when you're actually working on the rise, I teach that a lot, the bounce hit. So you can kind of get that rhythm, because on the rise is a little more difficult for a lot of people.
I think it's as valuable as well as it works. Like I've heard that drill used in a lot of different contexts for like a lot of different things, timing, rhythm, or taking the ball on the rise. I think for some players, it totally depends on your learning style. Like some players are more intuitive and they just need like that little bit of like structure or guidance or like a concept. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and it just works. Other players need more granular description and a little bit more detailed kind of technical guidance, or it just doesn't make, like bounce hit doesn't make sense. Like it's just two words. I'm more like the analytical type. I'm more on that side of the spectrum, but lots of players are over on the more intuitive, like feel kind of side of things. So yeah, I think for some players it works great and it's like an immediate improvement. Other players, they keep hitting exactly the same, but they just say bounce hit, and it's like, all right, well, what was the point? So I think you have to know how you respond to different coaching approaches, or if you're a coach, you need to know how your student responds to different coaching approaches. It's for sure not like a fixed thought, like, oh, just say bounce hit and your timing's fixed. If your name is Kirby and it's a Thursday, December 12th, and your timing is off, then maybe it'll work. But for Steve in Idaho, maybe not. So just don't treat it like it's some kind of magical like thing. It's not. It's totally situational. It's just a little coaching rant there.
All right, question from Affectionate
This is why I have a
85.
podcast.
Yeah, if you don't listen to his podcast,
Then maybe you shouldn't.
For a level player here, it's a challenge for me to take balls on the rise when they bounce close to me. I'd appreciate some tips on that. We have had a few other questions about hitting balls on the rise. So any tips would be really appreciated.
Hitting balls on the rise. You want to take that one?
It's all about timing and rhythm and timing. I think the main thing that amateur players who can't hit on the rise can't quite wrap their brain around is the fact that the swing begins well before the ball bounces. And so this is, in a way, it kind of goes in contrast or contrary to the whole bounce hit thing. Because if bounce is your internal indicator to start the swing, then it's too late. And you'll never really be comfortable hitting on the rise. And so if the ball is landing right in front of you, the swing needs to have started well before it ever bounced in the first place, so that as the ball is coming up, your racket has already dropped and it's already coming up towards contact. And for me, the best way to practice this is just with a basket of balls. Toss the ball up, give it a little bit of height, and then practice making contact at waist height as the ball first comes up off the court, not when it's on its way back down again from the bounce. It's really tempting to just kind of like scoop it right off the bounce, let it come up a little bit, and practice timing your swing so that you make contact right at waist height while the ball is coming up off the court. You want to toss it at least like 2 or 3 feet over your head to give it any significant bounce to where it's good timing practice.
The other thing I would add that I think is really important is knowing something about the ball. So I mean, we're talking about bounce hit a lot, but even within the bounce hit kind of theme, that you got to understand that the rhythm of every ball is going to be different. Let's say you have a person hits a heavy topspin ball where there's going to be a bounce and the ball jumping up compared to hitting a biting slice. That bounce hit rhythm might be quicker. So it's finding, knowing something about the ball you're getting. So you know what kind of spin and have a general knowledge that if this person, let's say, hit a backhand slice, well, the bounce isn't going to be as high and I might need to adjust my position being closer or farther away. I think another thing to add to that is that within each bounce and the different types of spin, you're going to need to set up differently away, different distance away from the bounce. Because if, let's say, you're playing somebody with a lot of heavy topspin and that ball really jumps up, you don't want to be right on top of the ball. Where if, let's say, somebody hits a floating slice and the ball's going to kind of bounce and not jump up, but it's going to sit up, you actually need to be a lot closer. So knowing that and kind of having that idea when you're taking the ball on the rise really helps you position your feet, because like the timing will come from the positioning of your feet. So if you don't know the timing or potential idea of the timing which you're going to get, you can't position your feet and you're never going to be in the perfect position or the right position to hit the ball on the rise.
Were you answering George Ryan's question in the chat?
No.
Because you pretty much just perfectly answered it. He said, if the swing begins before the ball bounces, how do you judge how high the ball will come up so that I can get my racket to the right spot? And so, yeah, George, it's all about reading and anticipating the shot that your opponent hits. You need to know the different swing paths, how much and what type of spin they result in, and therefore what kind of bounce to expect up off the court. If you're not, and this is why hitting on the rise in general is a pretty advanced skill, because if you can't read those things and tell what's going to happen before it happens, then you're kind of SOL when the ball bounces right in front of you and you had no idea it was sliced, and oh, surprise, the ball's 2 feet lower than you thought it was going to be. Then you're done, obviously. So anticipation is super, super critical, and being able to read swing mechanics and swing techniques is super, super critical.
Wyatt has been jumping in with his question for a while. I see you, Wyatt. How can I practice correct?
Stop plugging Kirby, Wyatt.
No, I love these people, but you are sassy. And I like it. Okay, how can I practice correct racket lag? I have a loose wrist and grip already, but I think I could always do better. So he's looking for specific instances, drills of correcting his racket lag and improving. What do we think?
Anybody else?
I think that's a tough one, not without seeing it, because I think there's so many other things that have to be set up to, let's say, have great racket lag. The thing I would focus on is just trying to relax your wrist without obviously letting go of the racket when you swing. I don't know, that's not the best answer without like seeing and saying like how you're set up, but kind of drills that I've had players, let's say, use to practice racket lag is just simply having them start off like here. And I think a lot of players have so much tension that when they swing, they really struggle with the racket lag, or they're really like dropping the racket. Well, here, I'll have them swing here and see if they can just relax. And instead of kind of dropping and then pulling, we're doing the same thing, and see if you can feel that flow. Another really online tennis has a, what's his name?
Tomas.
Tomas has a really great drill where I think he talks about really.
Oh, sorry, online tennis instruction?
Online tennis
Oh,
instruction.
that's Forehand.
Forehand has a really great one where he talks about where getting the racket where it's almost like touching the calf of the leg. And I really like that one. And you have to have your hand nice and relaxed for it to happen. And I've used that a lot. But I think those are really good drills that just help you understand how much relaxation has to happen or has to be in your hand to get that lag effect. And most players, like the earlier question is, how tight are you squeezing the racket? And when you start squeezing the racket really tight, there's not gonna be a lot of lag.
I think tension is super critical. And then the other ingredient, I think that's 100% required, which vast majority of amateur tennis players do not do, is we were talking earlier about the kinetic chain. The body needs to initiate the swing. If the body doesn't initiate the swing, if you're used to using your arm to hit the ball, it doesn't matter how loose you are. Lag, by definition, what lag means is that the arm and hand go behind the body. And by behind, I don't mean like describing literally their position, but meaning after, meaning timing. If the body doesn't initiate, then there is no lag. And so if you're not loose, it's really hard to make it happen. But once you are loose and relaxed, the other big critical part is starting with the hips and with the core, so that the hand and the racket head separate and go further back before going forwards to make contact, instead of staying sideways and just hitting the ball, which is what a huge percentage of amateur players do. We've done a lot of coaching on this. If you look at our VIP one-on-one coaching footage, I just posted a video in the chat where we worked a 3-0 player through some coaching progressions to develop that lag. So check that out for actual. James said, how separate? It's a good question. Like I've seen a lot of examples of people on the interwebs really over-exaggerating this, and like their chest is like this and their arm is like way back. That's why I was trying to explain what I meant by behind. The racket should still stay on the dominant side of your body. Should not go back behind your body. There should not be a 90-degree bend between your chest and your arm or anything like that. The vast majority of players have zero separation between their core and their arm. So quite frankly, any separation would be a good step for most of you watching. Record yourself on video and see where you are now. In general, on the court, as far as a feel exercise, I'm totally fine with players exaggerating during a shadow swing to get a feel for what that separation is like. A lot of times I ask players to feel for like an actual physical stretch in their shoulder, to feel what it's like to have their body actually lead the swing. In general, it's going to be hard for most of you to actually overdo it when a ball is coming towards you, but you do want to record yourself and make sure that you're not going too far, or else your shoulder will not be very happy.
Real quick, Kirby, you mind if I say something to the Facebook guys? There's a couple people who are asking some questions. Daniel, say hi to you.
Sorry, that's just what I do.
Rich.
Just gets excited.
I'm like a 13-year-old girl.
And I think there was one more up here, Lance. We are definitely going to answer some of those in a different webinar, but this one's just about the forehand. So if you have any questions about the forehand, definitely bring them up. But as of right now, those questions we will definitely get into at a different time for sure.
5-minute warning. It's almost been an hour already. We'll go for another 5 minutes, everybody. Sorry in advance if we have not answered your question. This is the first time we've ever tried this. We weren't quite sure what to expect, And honestly, the
Blown away.
engagement's been amazing. Sorry, we're not gonna be able to get to everybody, but we'll get through as many more as we can in the next 5 minutes.
I am now going to jump to Ahmed. Is there a difference between hitting a forehand by holding the grip on the third bevel and between holding it with third and a half?
Sorry, what was the question? Is there
a difference between hitting a forehand while holding the grip in the third bevel and holding the grip with a 3.5?
The difference is half a bevel.
Next question.
Yeah, I would call that a strong Eastern grip, kind of halfway between Eastern and semi-Western. There's no rule that says you have to be right in the middle of bevel 3 or right in the middle of bevel 4. You can ride the line in between. It's totally fine. Other than that, it's just really kind of personal preference. We talked about grips a little bit earlier. Depends on your playing style, how much of a driver you are versus more of a topspin player. Arky. Yeah,
Arky.
I think halfway between Eastern and semi-Western is a great compromise.
Hashtag.
It can absolutely be a good grip. Hashtag Arky.
Can I ask a quick question here?
Yes, please.
Lancy has a good question about the indexed finger on the forehand grip. I see that a lot when I was teaching a lot. I have a player that it keeps his index finger extended on the grip for his forehand. He uses a continental grip. I worry that he will have stress later if he does not change. That's tough, continental on the forehand.
Yeah,
not gonna lie, and the finger up.
I personally don't recommend it, having the finger all the way up. I'm a trigger finger guy, so it's like there's a little separation, but there's no kind of like where I'm holding the racket and it's all the way up. There's just a little kind of trigger finger at the end with my top hand. But I definitely wouldn't recommend it because I would probably agree that it might cause some stress later on with the amount of tennis balls you hit and you have that little impact with the finger going up.
I agree. Let's jump into, I love this question because I want you all to be like Ivan. Ivan's question was that he says that I was watching some slow motion video of myself and I noticed that I hit a mixture of bent arm and straight arm forehands, even though I was trying to hit exclusively straight arm forehands. Is this bad? Now, number one, my point about why I love this question is because he's using video. And if you are not using video,
1,000%.
then you need to be using video. It will help you so much to actually identify what is going on. That's how we teach our students. There are no exceptions. So because of that, I love this question. What do you guys think about straight arm versus bent arm forehands?
Well, if he knows his habit is bent arm and he was trying to hit in that particular practice session more of a straight arm, then seeing kind of a mix of the two should be 100% what he should have expected. Because especially if it was live ball hitting back and forth, doesn't matter how hard you concentrate. If it's a live ball rally or points, for sure, you just fully expect that when you're challenged a little bit more, then you're going to go right back to whatever your normal habit is. So this might have been a big success, honestly. Frankly, if half of them looked totally different, then that's great. Like, that's a good step in the right direction. I think straight arm versus bent arm is completely stylistic. Assuming bent arm means an appropriate amount of bend and your elbow's not up against your body. I think it's two different flavors of forehand, and either one can be world-class, as we've seen from Federer and Djokovic.
Yeah, I agree with, I think sometimes we get so caught up into the watching players and we only see a straight arm or we only see a bent arm and we feel we have to change. Both are, I think, great. I've taught both. But I think it's finding what works best for you. If you hit a great bent arm for him, don't feel like, oh, Federer hits a straight arm and I have to immediately stretch my arm out and hit it straight. It's that works best for Fed, so that's what he does. Djokovic, a little different. That's what works best for Djokovic, so that's what he does. I think it's finding out what thing you do best within the context of having it actually being correct. Like we're talking about, not bent into your body, but in the context of what's correct, what works best for you. Just the same things when we're talking about grips. I recommend semi-Western, and there's some flavors of kind of going a little bit more Eastern or going a little bit more towards the Western side, but it's always going to come back to what works best for you.
So Ivan says, is it okay to hit with a mixture in general?
Oh,
or should
mixture.
he be trying to hit exclusively like, oh, I'm a bent arm player versus I'm a straight arm player? I think situationally, one makes more sense than the other. I think if we keep the conversation constrained to one type of shot, AKA a rally ball, I think you should have one or the other that you're trying to hit. But within the context of like all ground stroke shots, then I think some will more naturally, like if you're stretched out, more naturally be straight arm. And if it's a rally ball, maybe for you more naturally bent arm. I think knowing yourself what style of play you're trying to hit is important, like what Kevin was just saying. But I would where I would personally draw the line is on a rally ball, you're hitting, oh, I'm going to try to drive this one more, so I'm going to hit more straight arm, or this one I'm going to hit a heavier ball, so I'm going to go for my bent arm forehand. I think that's starting to get too, you should be able to hit both with either style, and I don't think you should purposefully develop both styles for different situations. That's my feeling on it. What do you guys think?
No, I agree with that. I was thinking just in general, like if you're playing with one shot, my normal, let's say, rally ball is gonna be a bent arm, then I'm not gonna go bent arm, straight arm, bent arm for a particular ball. But you know, if you're thinking about mixing it, I think learn one, master that one, so it gives you a better chance to improve. I think if you're going back and forth, kind of like what Ian's saying, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna hit the straight arm this time, the bent arm, it doesn't really serve you as much long term.
Okay. It is now 12:34. I know.
You guys got 4 extra minutes. You're welcome.
All right. So really fast, thank you guys so much for being here. We do webinars like this every other week. And we already do it for our Academy students within Essential Tennis Academy. That's at essentialtennisacademy.com. We'll link it down in the description below as well, so that you can have access like this. And then we have forums as well where you have access to other students who also can jump in and help. It's an incredibly helpful resource. So if you are interested in that and you're looking for that, it's Essential Tennis Academy. Besides that, do you guys have any last forehand thoughts that you want to wrap up with?
Last forehand thoughts.
Just general, I just want to say thanks to everybody for the participation and the engagement in the chat. Been building this channel for almost 10 years now, and this is the first time we've done something live. So really happy to see the engagement in there, and you can bet we'll be doing this again in the future. We'll probably continue doing like specific focus topics. Let us know what you want to see in the comments. How was this format? Do you want to see anything different? What topic would you like to see next? Any suggestions or any like general comments on how we can make it better? Definitely let us know. That's all I got.
And just another side note, people from all across the world. I mean, James just wrote in to say that it's 2:34 a.m. in Taiwan.
He's mad, James.
I mean, thank you so
awesome.
much. We just appreciate your support so much. You guys have anything else that you want to say?
No, this is just unbelievable to get all these cool questions, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks to Facebook. You guys are awesome too. Appreciate you. I know that we are going to start doing some more Facebook Lives, so be prepared, and let us know what you thought of today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, guys. Thank you.